All right, mental health is critically important to overall well-being, but it is often overlooked. We live in a fast-paced world where many things can trigger mental issues. Having to deal with those emotions and the stigma around it can take an ever bigger toll. Let's discuss this with the founder of Mental Wealth ZA, Thabile Mpe. She dealt with depression herself and offers an online sanctuary for others like her. Thabile, welcome to eNCA and thank you very much for your time. What prompted you to actually start your podcast? I even saw on Twitter that you're giving some people advice, for instance, and retweeting other people's experiences. What, came to the decision that you start this podcast?
Thank you so much for having me. It was a response to my own experience with mental illness. I unfortunately had to have a breakdown in order for me to, start to seek help. And, I'm a fairly learned person. But I realized at my very first session that even I was carrying misconceptions and a lot of gaps in information about mental illness. And I thought, if I'm feeling this way, how is the average South African feeling, where we have gaps in education in general? So I thought, all right, let me start to speak about my experience. Let me start to destigmatize the entire concept of mental illness, because if I could go into a therapy session thinking that, mental illness was some dark, looming thing in anyone's life, how is anyone else feeling? And it became something that freed not only myself, but other people, because they got to see that one can be a fully functional, well-adjusted member of society once they start to address their mental illness. So that's what made me started.
I'm just asking this question because I'm thinking, because you have your own, mental health problems, does it not weigh a lot on you to hear also from other people asking you for advice, for instance? Does it not weigh a lot on you?
It does. It does, which is why I have to take self-care measures into place. So, for example, if I feel that it is weighing on me too much, and it's getting to a point where it is now hampering my own health, I'll take a break. And I do tell them, I refer to them as lovers. I don't know if you're aware of that, but I do tell my lovers that, listen, I'm going to need to take a break because I'm not all right. I also have an amazing support system. Before the pandemic, I could go home and sit with my mom and just cry if I needed to. So it does weigh on me. And luckily, the people who share with me do understand that sharing such sensitive and heavy information does affect me negatively in some ways, even though I love to help. They do understand that. And a lot of them come into my DMs and they'll start by saying, I'm so sorry for doing this to you, or thank you so much for listening to me. I know that this is a lot. So I do take measures, and the longer I've had the platform up, the better I've become at actioning those measures of self-care. But it does weigh very heavily on me, yes.
How important is it for people who, suffer from mental illnesses to have somebody to speak to, especially to break down the stigma that goes around it? I mean, a lot of people, for instance, didn't even realize that having something as simple as anxiety because of what previously happened to you, for instance, is actually also a mental illness. People are still afraid to talk. People are still afraid to say that they actually suffer from, for example, depression. How important is it that they have somebody to speak to?
It's absolutely vital. There are, as far as I can tell in my 4 years of treatment and therapy, there are two aspects to treating a mental illness. There is the medicinal treatment, and then there's the psychotherapy, right? And it really when you look at the psychotherapy aspect of it, it really only takes one person, and that one person can be your therapist, that one person can be your psychiatrist, that one person can be your best friend, it could be your husband, it could be your mother, it could be an uncle that's living in the Eastern Cape when you live in Johannesburg. But it just takes one person that you can rely on to be able to speak to when you're going through these things. And the thing is that mental illness is not all negative. I, for example, have bipolar mood disorder. If I'm in a manic episode, I might need one of my friends, for example, because he can tell when I'm manic, and he's the only person who can, to date, tell that I'm manic. And mania presents itself in happy moods and positive moods and hyperactivity. So you need to have these people with which you can share the experience. And the thing is that, you don't need to share everything, because this is very difficult to speak about. I have been doing this for 4 years, and it's still, takes a lot for me to open up when someone comes and they say, "Are you okay? What's wrong? I'm worried about you." But it really can only take one person just to lessen that emotional and mental load on you. And I stress the fact that it can take one person, because I know that for a lot of South Africans, we are still very heavily under the cloud of the stigma of mental illness. So for many South Africans, it can only be one person. It can be a teacher at school if you're young enough to still be at school. It can be one person. It could be a colleague at work. So that's why I'm stressing the one person. I don't want people to feel bad for not having an extensive support structure the way some of us might have. I don't want you to feel as though it is a reflection of you if you only have that one person to speak to, because it can only take one person. But it is so, so important to have some kind of outlet that is in the form of another human being, because that human touch does so much for you, and it affirms you. There's nothing that can affirm you better than another human being relating to your experience, even if they can't literally relate to your experience, which is, the case for many of us. I mean, what are the chances that I'm going to run into someone with bipolar mood disorder in my daily life, where they're willing to tell me that they have it anyway? But it's so important. It's vital to your therapy and to your healing to have at least one person with which you can feel affirmed.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time, Thabile Mpe, speaking to us there about mental health.